When I first got into boots, it was hard to ignore the draw that the Red Wing Iron Ranger had on the overall heritage boot community, but ignore them I did. Initially, I wasn't really keen on paying over $300 for a pair of boots. I didn't really know how to properly evaluate value in Goodyear welted footwear and things like that, so I ignored them. And in addition, I kind of wasn't keen on the shape, as I've heard many people say. The stereotypical clown shoe argument that you hear sometimes. But I figured, hey, I'll check them out, and then maybe down the road, I'll check them out again. And thankfully, I reached that point in the road finally, and that happened in November. I was browsing Black Friday sales, and I ended up picking up these Amber Harness 8111s from Iron Shop Provisions on a pretty sweet sale. So I was really happy with the purchase. My top leather choice probably would have been Copper Rough and Tough, at least at first thought, because that's definitely one of my favorite leathers. I have that in a Mock Toe 1907. But I figured for science, it's probably better to have two separate leathers from Red Wing so I can compare, contrast, and talk about them intelligently rather than just having one type of leather. And I'm happy to report that I actually really like them, and I wish I would have picked up a pair a lot sooner than I did. So today will act as the first look for these boots. As my channel's grown and I've picked up more and more boots, I've realized that I can't really wear a ton of boots enough to really give them the full due that they're deserving for long-term reviews. So I've picked out 10 boots that are going to be my core, and I'm going to wear those more often than not, and I'll be able to do regular updates on them, 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and so forth down the road. And I'll try to keep that core 10 boots the same. And maybe over time we'll remove one and add a new one if we get some cool ones, but these Red Wing Iron Rangers and Amber Harness will be one of those 10 boots in that core rotation. So you'll be seeing a lot more regular updates of these. Probably the first real big update will be at 6 months, and then we'll do a year. But if something interesting happens or if they start to look cool, I'll do more updates. And so in that 10 boot rotation that I'm going to have, I'm going to do a separate video on that sometime soon to introduce all of those. But it'll be 8 boots that you've seen on the channel before, including these Iron Rangers. It'll be one pair of boots I got on Black Friday sale that I haven't had a chance to film yet, and then one pair of boots that are currently being made right now and hopefully will be in by the end of February. So first things first, I want to delve into the sizing of these boots. A lot of people reference Iron Rangers for sizing when they're talking about different brands, or say, hey, if I'm a 8.5 in Iron Rangers, what would I be in these? So that's something that was also a big selling point for me. Running this channel and giving a lot of advice to people on different boots, I wanted to have something another data point that was common ground amongst many people that I could help provide sizing recommendations for. So for me, my Brannock size is 10.5D heel to ball and 10D heel to toe. So the Brannock instructions that come with the device, yes, I actually bought one, say to take the larger of those two sizes and consider that to be your true Brannock size. So 10.5D for me. I took these in 10D, so half down from Brannock, and that ended up being perfect for me. That's no surprise because most boots I have, with just maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, are 10D, and they all seem to work pretty fine. I've come to the conclusion I have kind of a pretty standard shaped foot because really there aren't any lasts that don't work for me. I guess I'm just sort of lucky in that regard, right? The number 8 last that these boots are built on by Red Wing claims to fit a lot of foot shapes on their website. I think that's probably true, and after wearing them a little bit, I think there's probably some science or some reasoning behind that at least. The front is a little bit more generous, which if a boot's going to be a little generous or a little tight to fit more foot type, you want it to be a little more generous. There's no real sharp or quick curves or angle changes or anything like that within. So it's more likely to fit a lot of foot shapes, to an acceptable range, perhaps rather than being perfect on some feet, it's going to be acceptable for more feet. And that's probably a trade-off that Red Wing was conscious in making, and I think it's probably a good choice when you're trying to accommodate a lot of people. And even though I've had these since late November, I really didn't start wearing them in earnest until sometime in January. So I've only worn them about 8 times. I'd still consider myself to be in the break-in period for these. The footbed itself and the heel and things like that, I really have no issues. They fit me quite well. So even though they still feel a little stiff in spots and perhaps my foot imprint's not fully imprinted in the insole, I have no issues with that part of the boot. The only small issue I have is with the upper leather, specifically on the right boot. It's pretty stiff here along the sides, specifically where the gusset is tied in between the first eyelet here and the last eyelet and the first speed hook. So you get a little bit thicker leather. So there's something about this part on this boot that if I tie them to the relative tightness that I would generally tie my laces, it's pretty uncomfortable right here. Now, thankfully, just sort of loosening them, it alleviates that, and feeling the leather there. Once things soften up a bit, I think that should completely go away. And even if it doesn't completely go away, I can still, maybe tie that first speed hook just slightly looser, and it's completely fine. So in that regard, I'd say for me at least, break-in hasn't been too bad, even though it continues. If things change, I will definitely update you. But I have heard many people talk about how their Iron Rangers took forever to break in. And again, maybe I just have a very standard foot shape and size, so perhaps I'm lucky. But yeah, really no big issues for me with the break-in of these boots. Okay, so that's really it for the video. This is, again, just a first look. I didn't really go into a lot of the specs and things like that. I guess I could just mention a few. But most of you watching this probably already know. SB foot tanning, Red Wing owned tannery since the 80s. Amber harness leather, so it's a full grain, very nice leather. It patinas quite well. You've got a Vibram outsole, which has the Red Wing heel stack here. That's kind of one of their calling cards. You've got leather insole. You've got some textile kind of lining on the inside. You've got your triple Puritan stitch. Yeah, just real basic boot, which is what people really like about these, right? So really not much more to say. If you want to see how these age over time, and if you want to check out my other boots that'll be in my 10 boot rotation, please stick around with the channel. If you haven't subbed, please consider subscribing. There'll be a lot more of this sort of long-term boot update stuff on the channel going forward now that I have a lot of boots and I've had them for a while. So pretty much every few weeks you'll see a new annual update or at least a new 6-month update, things like that. So lots of cool stuff coming forward with Rocky Mountain Style. Thank you very much for spending your time with me today. I really appreciate it, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you.